very well-meaning business mentors will say, you just need to show up as yourself. But to your point, it's like, well, what does that even mean? How do I do that? How we do that is we go back in, and my favorite definition of enlightenment, I heard Mark Gaffney first say, and he said, it's to see reality as it actually is. And if we want to show up as ourselves in an enlightened state, we'll say, then we first need to see ourselves as we actually are. And that means actually taking a look under the hood and seeing what stories have been running the show and looking at them and realizing that that monster in the closet that we didn't want to address is actually just a pile of clothes.
Five, four, three, two, one. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Conscious Grounding Podcast with myself, Anthony Manuel, where we're having elevated conversations kept way down to earth. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Coach Chase Tolleson. Now, Chase is an absolute force of a human being. And if you happen to run across him online, you'll see that he serves online coaches and entrepreneurs by creating business systems and digital content strategies to hit that $15,000 a month mark. But you see offers like that all over the internet, and you'd be deceived if you think that it's just another online business mentorship business that he's running. Under the hood of what he's doing is the deep work and personal transformation that brings his clients into a deeper embodiment of their own authenticity. It's not just about marketing frameworks and funnels. He drives a stake into the hearts of their deepest held stories, unearths suppressed emotions embedded in unconscious beliefs, and reshapes the language that creates their reality. Now, this is a particularly special episode of the podcast for me because Chase has been the coach who's been in my corner for the last 3 months, not necessarily for business mentorship, but for tackling some of the deepest personal work I've done on my own journey. He's helped me unravel the tangled, crossed wires of my unconscious and has helped me overcome some of my biggest struggles and inner blocks. He's been instrumental in getting me through, I'm going to say, the most challenging period of my life, and I don't know how I would have gotten through all of it without him. And what I really love and appreciate about Chase is how spiritually tapped into the more subtle and magical dimensions of reality he is, while being so incredibly grounded and practical and just fucking real. And that's the definition of conscious grounding. That's what this podcast is all about. It's taking all that high level stuff and bringing it right down to earth, connecting it to the realities of our humanity and this material reality that we're living in. And so I'm so excited to have him on the show and talk about everything from using the power of language to shift the story that you're living, to pivoting and defining your life purpose in unexpected ways. And we're going to go all over the place on this podcast. So Chase, man, thank you for being here today.
Anthony, I am going to take what you said there and use it to describe how I do what I do. That was absolutely beautiful, brother. Thank you.
Well, man, I get to experience it firsthand, and my goal for these is to try to bring forward the brilliance of other people and to really showcase what it is that they do in the most powerful ways. So, thank you for being the shining exemplar of all the things that I just said, man. Like, you've changed my life in ways that I can't even begin to describe, and we'll try to describe some of it on this conversation.
Oh, I am looking forward to the ride.
Yeah, so I'd love to get going by straight from the horse's mouth. Hear what you're all about and how you got to what you're all about in your own words.
When I was 4 years old, my father had a weight bench in his bedroom. So fitness was ingrained from a young age. Like, my dad was a meathead. My dad grew up divorced parents. My uncle's friend told my uncle he was scared of my dad because my dad had gotten in knife fights. My dad was either going to end up in jail or flying as an airline pilot because it was a place where he could go to work when he wanted to go to work and fly airplanes. And when he started flying, the airlines were still like, let's go fly jets and fly them fast and do cool stuff. I was a skinny kid with a big head. I was skin and bones as a kid. And I watched my dad work out, and finally, when I was 12, I remember sprinting upstairs at the local Lifetime Fitness so I could use the weights, because you had to be 12 to use the resistance training stuff. And 8th grade, I'm 13, I walk into school with a tank top and a buzz cut, and one of my buddies goes, dude, you look like you have cancer, because I was still that skinny. So through high school, it was all just pack on muscle. I drove an 88 Camaro IROC Z, had a leather jacket, walked into school smelling like cigarette smoke and cannabis most days, one of the last kids walking in. And I got in a fight my junior year of high school that they had to close down the intersection of the hallway to clean up blood. I left high school, so back it up to 8th grade. My dad was a second-generation United pilot. If you get your bare minimum requirements, you are guaranteed an interview if your family member was a pilot for the airlines. Well, I was in 8th grade in September 2001. And if anybody remembers what happened in September 11th, 2001, the airline industry got flipped on its head. My dad went from having what they called like the golden contract to, he still made a good living, but it was almost cut in half, right? The money was not there when I turned 14 for glider lessons, which would have been the first step in learning to fly and going down that road. So I went through high school like, what am I going to do? My mom, I was the firstborn. My mom steered me away from the military at first, like when I was 16, 17. And I got out and I went to community college. My GPA was 0.742, 0.742. I sold cars for a semester. I went back to community college thinking I wanted to try getting into the pilot game. And it was all just a non-starter. It's like, all right, fine. I'll go talk with the Air Force. I'll be an air traffic controller. I'll come out and I'll have a stable career lined up. And then I got a sniff of like the special operations stuff, right? And here I am, a 19 or 20-year-old male, meathead, angry, like, yeah, dude, let's go do this. I ended up bowing out of the Air Force obligation, went over and talked to the Navy. Well, actually, first I talked to the Army. And they said, sorry, can't guarantee you Ranger because of your misdemeanor. I was picked up with some cannabis in the car and some pipes. And my buddy ate the hash when I was 18. And I walk over to the Navy. I was like, hey, what's the EOD? Seems cool. They're like, dude, why don't you just go full send and go SEAL? If you go get your eyes fixed, we'll get you a waiver for your misdemeanor. It's like, sweet. Now, my mom's cousin was retired Air Force and worked at the Pentagon, Department of Missile Defense. He has since become the senior civilian at the Department of Naval Intelligence. And my mom told her cousin, like, yeah, Chase wants to go SEAL. He's like, you don't want your kid doing that. They're basically just trained assassins. Like, they're just, trained killers. And he sends me a book, and it was about a mission gone wrong, Operation Red Wings, where a SEAL got stranded on the side of a mountain. Later got turned into a movie. Book was called Lone Survivor. And it was supposed to dissuade me. Now, what he didn't bet on was that I'm a testosterone-laden, 20-year-old at the point, who hasn't dealt with any of his emotional baggage. So I read this book in 72 hours, put my Camaro up for sale that I said I'd never sell to pay for LASIK, and went full tilt, running, swimming. Like, dude, when I took my physical standards test, I was passing people underwater in the pool. And then I go up to contract in on January 26, 2010. I sit down, they go, sorry, new instruction was sent out 5 days ago. Your misdemeanor is no longer waiverable. It's like, oh, cool. I went home and my dad was flying. He was out of town. But my mom, my brother, my sister, and I sat around the table, and not a word was said at dinner that night. Nobody knew what to say. I went out in the garage, had a temper tantrum, hit some things. I went out and smoked a whole lot of weed. And it wasn't interacting with cannabis. I was smoking a lot of weed. And my second cousin actually went to bat for me. He's like, all right, if this is what you want to do. And he handed my package to the Deputy Chief of Naval Personnel. And he takes this admiral, takes one look at it, reads it. He's like, sorry, don't believe his story. Can't help him. Kicker is, that story was the one the recruiters told me to write. So I said, get me out of town as fast as possible. I'm sick of playing this merry-go-round. Fast in 2010 was like 3 months. They said, okay, you're an engineman. You leave in 9 days. So I did a detox, cleaned my system out so I would pass the piss test at boot camp. And I went into the Navy. I planned on dropping a SEAL package. Now, here's the wrinkle. I ended up at a ship there was only 80 guys billeted, and I'm really, really, really good with a wrench in my hands. And my command told me, sorry, even if you get accepted to go to Buds, we're not going to let you go. So I went through 4 years in the Navy with a chip on my shoulder, got out, opened a gym in 2014, and that was a business is personal development on steroids. And from there, so opened up as CrossFit, got into more individualized, realized there was more of the mindset and personal development that was holding people back from achieving their fitness goals. Went online in 2018, full tilt online in 2020, as with a lot of brick and mortar fitness studio owners who were trying to just cover bills. And then 2021, it's funny. Well, this will be our segue into words and stories here. We cast in spells every time we speak. In January 21, I'm sitting there and I tell my coaches, hey, January 22, I'm out of day-to-day operations. I want you guys to be the face of the gym. Well, throughout 21, my young head coach got into a toxic relationship and she was in his ear and he ended up bowing out. My GM got less and less bought in and was scheduling herself time off that we had agreed outside of what we agreed upon, and all came to a head on November 27th, 2021, when my little brother passed away unexpectedly. Some would say he died suddenly. If you know, you know. And at his celebration of life, I realized I wasn't in pictures and videos because I was running a gym that barely paid for groceries. My online coaching was eclipsing it. So I shut my gym down, got out of the lease 18 months early and went full tilt online. And that was January 22. That was fitness and mindset. And in 2023, people started coming back to me, clients, saying, hey, how'd you build this thing? And fast forward to now, that's what got us here, helping coaches build businesses authentically by utilizing the tools that you explained more eloquently than I usually do.
And so what are those tools in your own words, and how did you come across them? How did you integrate them into your own practice? How did they become such a big part of your work?
Thank you for asking. I was aiming to keep the how do we get here at Cliff Notes. And 2020, we started a podcast because, I had a little extra time on my hands. Mm-hmm. And that podcast, we ended up, we got a guy on who had owned a local CrossFit gym who was running a company called Alpha Hippie. His name was Angelo Cisco. And we started talking about, we do this vocabulary thing. Like we had stopped recording, right? Like, we do this vocabulary core language upgrade. We found it on Barbell Shrugged in 2017. And we have all our coaches go through. He's like, oh man, I know Mark. Do you want him on the podcast? We're like, absolutely. So Mark England comes on the podcast. We have a really good conversation. And at this point, Mark had not started talking about Enlifted. They had only had 8 groups go through. They're at like group 50 now, I think, on their level 1 certification. We get done. I'm like, hey man, what's this Enlifted thing that I see? And he goes, oh, you and I ought to get on a call. So we get on a phone call after the podcast. He's like, actually, we did the intro get to know each other call for group 9 last week, but like you can jump in. We got a spot. So I jumped in and lifted level 1 group 9. And it turns out that, yes, our words are very important. And stories are made up of words. And as much as the words, the abracadabra from Aramaic for with my word I create, with my word I influence, while those are paramount, every action, every happening, every event in our lives has a story that we ascribe meaning to. And the big ones can sometimes have these negative meanings. And those negative meanings, whether we realize it or not, are buried in our subconscious, in our nervous system, in our tissue, in our energy field. And the Enlifted Method is a very simple, very actionable way to go in and pull on these threads and find these stories, air them out, and then keep moving forward. And that is the work I do. And I have waded deep into psychedelic, into esoteric, into worked 14 weeks one-on-one with an intuitive mentor and proved to myself and her that I am psychic to a degree. I keep coming back to this work.
And for reference too, this is the first time I've ever experienced any type of story work. Was working with you, and I've spent years doing traditional yogic meditations. I've spent probably over $100,000 in personal development and personal mentors and coaches and programs and personal development. I've read 500 books or more and have applied every possible personal development fucking tactic and strategy and mindset shift and Tony Robbins hoorah, whatever the fuck. And I've gone through some deep work. I've experienced a lot of great personal transformation. I've made some big shifts, but nothing has impacted me quite as much as the work that you and I have done in terms of a level of release of internally generated resistance, in terms of the phenomenon of getting in your own way. People say, oh, you just got to get out of your own way, right? You just got to, or just be yourself, and you're like, how the hell do you do that? And, the work that you and I have done has been really, really profound. And I would love for listeners. So for people who are just listening, Mark England is the founder of the Enlifted coaching method, which is a form of story work. And, my experience has been, you take a subject, some sort of like emotionally charged point.
Yeah.
Right. You and I had a conversation, and I was basically telling you what was going on in my life. And you asked me questions about my family and about different things, about my business, about my relationships. And all the while you're kind of taking notes on this Google document. And after our conversation, you open up this Google document and we go through, and you're like, you have these things that I said, these little snippets of things that I said in our conversation. And you say, these are all titles of stories that you have. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I'm looking at this Google document. I'm like, oh shit, like, okay, that's interesting. And then the process would be, I'd go in and I would type out the story the titles of these stories. I would go write out what the stories were. And I would sit with myself and I would, stream of consciousness, whatever the story is behind this title. And then we would go in, we'd go through it, read it out loud. There's a whole process, right? And for people who are listening, can you explain the magic of this? Like how this works?
Yeah. And there's one story that I like to lean on for this, and it's when I had my gym and I was starting this work, right? And what you experience is Chase 4 to 5 years later, where I've gotten really good at just asking questions. We'll have a bunch of stories out right away, right? At its core, this method, this is part of the reason that it has taught me so much about marketing. Because, like, this client at my gym, she comes to me, she goes, hey, I think I need a Chase psychology session. I'm like, I don't think we can legally call it that. And cool, let's sit down. What's going on? Like, she's paying good money to us for personal training and nutrition coaching. She's like, I'm just not sticking to my nutrition. I keep snacking at night. Like, cool. When's the last time you snacked? Last night I went through a bag of chocolate. Cool. Write me that story about going to the cabinet and getting the chocolate. So we wrote that story out. And she read it out. I was like, all right, what do you feel? What's the strongest emotion? Anxiety. How strong? 8 out of 10. Where is it in your body? I think it's probably in her chest. When's the first time you remember feeling that? And bro, the amount of times I've seen this from people, her eyes went poof. Oh, when I was 12 years old and my mom was pressuring me to have a certain body type for cheerleading. So we went back and we wrote that story out. And we went through the 4-step method where we write it, we read it conversationally, we read it slower, and we read it with a breath at certain marks. Guess who stuck to her nutrition after that? Because we removed that emotional anchor that this isn't who she is. And to your point about authenticity, I've been towing a line in my Instagram content about, like, just because very well-meaning business mentors will say, you just need to show up as yourself. But to your point, it's like, well, what does that even mean? How do I do that? how we do that is we go back in, and my favorite definition of enlightenment, I heard Mark Gaffney first say, and he said, it's to see reality as it actually is. And if we want to show up as ourselves in an enlightened state, we'll say, then we first need to see ourselves as we actually are. And that means actually taking a look under the hood and seeing what stories have been running the show and looking at them and realizing that that monster in the closet that we didn't want to address is actually just a pile of clothes.
One thing that comes up for me when you explain that is this idea of people holding an idealized self. Right? For example, your client there had this idealized self as a 12-year-old girl being pressured and have a certain body type as a cheerleader, which might have even motivated her in the future to pursue fitness and go to the gym and do all this stuff. But I know from my perspective, I developed this projected idealized self, and this is how I wanted to be. This is how I wanted to show up. And so when you have this idealized self and this is how you want to see yourself, and you start to develop an ego around that, all the other stories that you have about yourself, you don't want to see yourself as. And when you suppress that, that's what becomes your shadow. That's your unconscious. That's your subconscious. Those are the exiles of your personality. And some of the most profound healing that I think that I experienced in doing some of this work with you is I just went into these stories of all these things that I didn't like to look at in myself. And it was almost like a confessional. Right? Like in Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the first things that they do is they go confess all the lies and all the things, and you make these reconciliations. You confess all the things that you feel shame about, and you that release and that confession, that being seen, that almost brings up all these exiled, suppressed aspects of your unconscious into the light of consciousness, and then it can actually be healed.
Yes, sir.
And so even addressing, when you're talking about these unconscious, subconscious stories, a lot of this stuff is exile. Dude, the amount that I've cried in front of you is fucking hilarious.
I've told people before, Uncle, I have watched, and I have watched businessmen, this is the most spiritual thing they've gotten into, right? And they'll I've seen it. Homeboy puts his Zoom on mute and he just paces around his kitchen where he's taking the call, just sobbing for 10 minutes. And it's good. Joseph Campbell, any feeling felt fully is bliss. And if there's a dangerous thread in the spiritual and conscious community where we can go, well, everything's good and I'm just going to look at the good. And all the while, we're leaving this stuff completely unaddressed. We're in a sense, some people would say spiritually bypassing. I'll say spiritually gaslighting ourselves into believing that we're okay.
I like that a lot. I mean, when you're talking about authenticity as being able to see reality for what it is, that means accepting the whole of reality, not just the good stuff, right? And in a previous conversation on a previous episode that I did on this podcast, someone was talking about the fact that we're shamed for feeling negative emotions, where if you feel grief or you feel anger, if you throw a temper tantrum as a kid, your parents are like, stop. If you're feeling sad, you're crying. It's like, oh, stop crying. Just be happy. Right. And so there's this idea that if we're not happy or we're not in this elevated mood, we're not good vibes only, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with us. And so we're constantly trying to run away from the heavier or darker sides of the human experience, which are fundamental to our reality. And when we deny those or we suppress those and we're absent of that full range of human experience, we don't get to be authentic because we're ignoring or denying or suppressing or evading or dissociating from half of our being.
Let's look at our energetic being and our emotional state. And this is my first time tossing this analogy out here. You're a musician. I played piano a little bit when I was a kid, right? Let's look at our vibrational state as piano. All the notes, right? And everybody only wants to play up here, right? But the low notes and the flat notes, those are important too in any composition. Now, what happens is people will have something down here on one of these notes, and they don't want to play it. They don't want to, and that key starts sticking, and then dust builds up on that string. And then how are you supposed to live your full experience if you don't have access to your full range? So I don't know. That's the first time I've used that one, and it may take refinement, and I believe you get where I'm going there.
It's a good analogy, right? I think the idea of a full range of expression, right? And this is where what I've noticed is that when you suppress the parts of yourself that you don't want to accept about yourself.
Yeah.
Marion Woodman, who she's a Jungian psychoanalyst, and I was reading her story about. I was reading this great book called The Great Work of Your Life, which is about Dharma and your life purpose. And she was diagnosed with cancer, and she, basically was like at first resisted this thing where it's like, oh, I can't have cancer. Like, I had plans for my life. I'm young still, and then she did something radical, and she accepted that as her life path. And one of the things that she kind of looked at as like every grief and every really harrowingly difficult experience that she had and everything that came up for her in that experience, she saw as a sign from life or from God or from the universe as a way to bring her into greater wholeness in herself. And so there's been this paradigm shift since you and I have started working together, where prior it was about self-improvement. It was about how do I approach greater embodiment of this idealized self that I've projected into the future. And my entire life was about addition. It was about like, I was constantly feeling like I was never enough because I was constantly falling short of this idealized self. And it was always about like, what can I do to improve? What can I do to iterate? How can I be like, more successful, more into, I think there's some truth to that, in terms of the process of self-actualization and embodying more of who we're meant to be. There is a side of that. However, I've shifted from the paradigm of approaching perfection or trying to embody the ideal to how can I become more whole in myself? How can I be more wholly myself and own and express my full range? And to live into the full reality of my experience, the full reality of who I am, the full reality of my humanity. How do I embody that and become whole?
I love the way you put that. What comes up for me there is the idea that if we are all unique puzzle pieces that fit into the tapestry of life in a certain energetic signature, then when we show up as our full selves, when we know our full self and show up as our full self, there is literally more divinity in the world because that puzzle has another piece completed.
This feels like a good segue into, because my framework is definitely that everyone has an individual dharma. We're all born with the seed of the life that we're meant to live. Everyone comes into the world with the intention to manifest as their whole self, and their whole self is unique to them. Everyone's born with their own individual taste. That's the essence of my work. And you've influenced the direction and the essence of that work for me. It's what my music is about. It's what my business is about. It's what my work with other people is about. It's what my life path is about. Now, I'd love to segue into conversations about divinity and conversations about the spiritual realm, because we're getting into some of the headier, higher dimensional conversations now.
Yeah.
But talking about the divine tapestry, talking about embodying and bringing divinity into the world, you're speaking my language. This is all speaking to my soul. Let's talk about that cosmology, man.
Wow. I'll add to this segue that if everything is vibration, spoiler alert, it is, and words are sound and sound is vibration, then the words we speak and the intonation with which we speak them and the feeling around them and whether or not they uphold or betray the silence is absolutely paramount. They're one of the most practical tools we can use to influence this divinity and to step into it. Now, from there, where do we want to go? Do we want to talk about the lessons that 5-MeO can teach? Do we want to talk about reaching out and touching this time-space continuum and having my Bluetooth headphones disconnect at the same instant?
I would actually love to. There was something that you said there about the vibration behind words, that reality is vibration, and how words and the emotion behind the words can influence the vibrational field of your reality. And have you ever seen the movie Waking Life?
No.
It's my favorite movie. I've probably seen it 25, 30 times. And
Okay.
I don't rewatch movies very often, but this is a movie, and the premise is this guy is in a dream, and every time he wakes up, he's waking up into another layer of his dream, and every time he's in the dream, he's having these interactions that are conversations about existential philosophy, essentially. And it's a phenomenal movie, but there's a scene where he's having a conversation with this woman, and she's talking about the challenge of using words to communicate and be understood by someone. And she says, if I use the word love and you say you understand what I mean, how can I really be sure that you understand what I mean when I say the word love? Because my experience of love, based on the love that I received from my parents and the romantic relationships that I was in, I have this like certain, like it hits the vibration hits our ear, it goes through the Byzantine conduit of our brain, and it's traveling through all of our different memories of love or a lack of love. So how do I know that when I say that word, it has the same meaning to you? I don't. And so I find it interesting because you do so much story work. And then I find that there's certain words that people have that have a whole story behind it as well.
Yes. So, on the note of love, it's interesting that you say that, and I tossed out the 5-MeO thing because I'll draw. I accidentally hurt my mom's feelings recapping my third 5-MeO experience for her. Because my mother had yet to have a truly transformative, heroic dose kind of psychedelic experience. And on my third 5-MeO journey, they're via dosed pens, right? So it's supposed to walk your nervous system up. Each one gets twice as strong as the other. And I know the guy by now. I'm at his house, and he goes, all right, you're going to take 4, take 5, take 6, hold your breath. I'll see you on the other side. And brother, when I say that I was plugged into the power grid of the universe, like I wasn't standing out back here holding onto a power line. I didn't have a fork in a socket. I was standing in the supernova that powers it all. Right? And I'm on my back in this physical, and I'm just laying on the ground, reaching up in the sky, and then my arms fall to my side, and I'm intuitively scooping right back here into my heart center. And as I ground back into my body, I get hit with this just immense bliss and gratitude, and I start crying. And I realize that power grid, that supernova that I was tapped into, that force that you tap into when you want to do anything, was love. And to draw your point home about words and our personal experiences being different, I recapped this for my mom, just trying to share the beauty of it with her, and she actually got a tear in her eye. Because, and I told my wife about this. She's like, are you sure it wasn't like sadness? I didn't have a kid at this point. I didn't consider the fact that my mother in that moment was like, you mean I didn't teach you what love was?
Oh.
You didn't feel that from me? But then after my brother passed, she went and ate 7 grams of mushrooms, and she goes, oh, that's what you mean. Yeah.
So I want to talk about that as an experience when you, because some people are curious about psychedelic medicine. Some people are curious about the therapeutic possibilities of having these transcendent experiences where you go beyond the conventional senses and you experience things like that. I have extensive experience with psychedelic medicines. My time in Tulum has exposed me to new medicines like ayahuasca. I was in a traditional Mexican mushroom ceremony recently. And again, these transcendent experiences are so profound and so powerful. And I've also had it where I've taken these psychedelic medicines and I have these profound experiences and I'm still the same dumb fuck the next week.
Yeah. So that was an early LSD experience for me. Like, just playing around as a kid. And like, bro, we're walking down the street. It's 2:30 in the morning. And we had gotten a call from one of our buddies. Like, yeah, you can walk down here. Come hang out here. And 2:30 in the morning, I slap a leaf on a tree, and as I hit the leaf, a car alarm goes off in the mall over a mile away. And then I'm like, wow, it's like it's only a look, but not to touch. And this weird warm gust of wind blows up as I say that. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool because like we're walking and we're seeing different stuff, but like it's all the same because we put it here. And right after I say that, a rabbit runs across the sidewalk right in front of us. Like the synchronicities were synchronized very much so on this evening. Well, we get about halfway to his house and we forget that we were even going there, and we turn around, we walk back. And we're sitting out back of my parents' house, me and my buddy, wee hours in the morning, staring up at the stars, doing what teenagers on psychedelics do, philosophical ramblings. And we get quiet for a second. I look up at the stars and I just get hit with this zoom. And it was given to me in that moment. Now, here's the thing. When it's given to you guys, everybody listening, sometimes it's just for you. And I was so young and wanted to share what I knew in that moment that I sat up and I was like, dude, guess what happened right then? My phone vibrated. I reached down and I silenced it and it was gone. My ability to articulate what was given to me was gone. Because it was like, no, like you have it. But he gets to go find it on his own. And my misuse there kept me kind of spinning for a bit.
Likewise, I think there's whenever you have I remember I had a really, really good friend who I lived with, actually, and he lived his life as a spiritual teacher for many years of his life. And he used to tell a story of when he first had that experience of oneness with everything. He would run around and be like, you don't understand, we're all one, you don't get it, and it's like kind of like the cosmic joke of like, no, we are all one and I am one with you, and you separate from me don't understand the oneness. And it's like the joke, right? The ego traps that we kind of fall into. Now, in the spirit of conscious grounding, right? You have an experience that expands your consciousness to that degree. You take 5-MeO-DMT and you plug into the power grid. You experience that the underlying energy, the undercurrent of reality itself is the energy of love. And you come back into your body and you ground back into your senses, and you have your ego, your personality, you chase with your story, and you're in the Navy, and you have your wife and you have your kid, and you're back here, and go talk to your mom, and you're back as a human being, living your life, living your story. How does that change how you operate day to day?
It's really interesting because that third experience in particular, there was very little room to integrate before. That was November of 21. That was only a couple of weeks before my brother passed. So in a way, that one prepped me, like, in the hospital that day, I was able to, when someone would start crying, I just went over, I would give them a hug, I would stay breathing low and slow, and before you know it, they stop sobbing, and their breathing would synchronize with mine. And there's an interesting tangent there around the law of entrainment and grandfather clocks. 1600s, a physicist was laid up sick in bed. He was in the UK, and physics in the 1600s, he was tinkering with grandfather clocks, and they were at the foot of his bed. He realized that no matter how he put them back together, they would fall in sync with each other, swinging in opposite unison across the room. He was laughed out of the room when he brought this up to the governing bodies of science in the UK at the time. Recent decades, it's been proven that those grandfather clocks were communicating through tiny vibrations in their wooden housing across the room. Now, here's where I tie this into authenticity and knowing yourself fully. If you put a bunch of grandfather clocks in the same room as each other, they all fall into sync with the largest clock in the room. And if we tie that into the 3 degrees of influence, your habits, actions, behaviors, addictions, and beliefs are contagious to your friends. Well, if you become your own biggest grandfather clock, you can filter what comes back to you and only send the good stuff out. And if you're in a hospital, in the critical care unit waiting room, and your little brother is brain dead, plugged into machines because his heart stopped so many times that his brain is swelling, and his 27-year-old wife is having to make the decision to pull the plug, you're able to keep your composure. Now, since we're on this tangent, I'll finish this story for the listeners. That does not mean that I was just this emotional blob. No, I was able to hold my center there in the hospital for everybody. I was able to keep control of my breathing. And when I got home, I put my hand on my island and I said, my little brother died today. And I buckled. And then I took a deep breath. And then I said it again. And I took a deep breath. And I said it again until I could say it like I just said it. And then I woke up the next morning and I sobbed so hard in bed that my wife swears I shook the foundation of the house. Pulled myself up, took a cold shower, went back over to my parents' house and kept being the biggest grandfather clock in the room. So, bit of a tangent from how that 5-MeO experience ended. That is how, with the knowledge that everything is love, it makes it a lot easier when somebody passes.
In what way does it make it easier?
I don't know if it was that experience on 5 or my second one where I melted into and became a rainbow river of source consciousness. Knowing that, like, having the comfortable knowing that it's all still here. This meat suit may be our manifestation of how we play in this theme park that is the time that we've incarnated, and it's all still here.
Terence McKenna has a saying that nothing lasts, but nothing's lost. Yeah. Terence McKenna, for those who don't know, is one of the great psychonautical philosophers who probably has more experience with elucidating on the nature of psychedelic experience than any human being that's ever lived.
He also used to say that the problem with mushrooms is people aren't taking enough. Giving yourself an opportunity to resist it. You need to eat more and just go meet God.
Yes, and.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated by the therapeutic benefits of psychedelics, and also, like, being the teenager that gets the insight and doesn't know what to do with it, not having the foundation and the integration. I think the reason that my more recent psychedelic experiences have been so beneficial to me, for example, has been because of the huge foundation of the story work that you and I have done. The huge amount of clearing and the grounding that I was able to experience in a lot of the sober work that I've done, a lot of the somatic release that I've done, a lot of the, taking care of my physical vessel, the grounded practical realities of, like, being a human being living in this 3-dimensional world, operating in the laws of physics, and being able to honor that and ground into that very, very deeply. It almost creates a container to be able to hold some of those, like from a mind perspective, from a physical perspective, you can hold a greater breadth and depth of those tremendous infinite insights, or the experience of infinity itself.
Yeah, I've developed a theory that when we're in a completely unenhanced state, we'll say, and we're willingly taking a look at the stories that come up, and we've learned how to tap into the subtle energies in our body and see, oh, this one comes from here and this one comes from here. Well, then you can choose to no such thing as a bad trip. It's like, all right, what is this? Where is it coming from? And we can get curious. And that's power, and that is where the closest thing to instantaneous integration can happen.
I think that, just adding to that, because of the recent paradigm shift that I had from, like, pursuing perfection in this elevated state, and as opposed to now, it's the goal or the orientation of my life is to embrace wholeness, is that I used to view suffering or emotions like grief or emotions like anger as a problem to be solved. And now I view them as an invitation to come deeper into my wholeness, an invitation to know myself more deeply, to come into deeper communion with the reality of my being. And that paradigm shift has brought me closer to God. It's brought me closer to the people in my life. It's allowed for more authentic expression in my intimate relationships and my friendships and my relationship with my family. It's allowed me to speak truth more courageously. It's allowed me to embrace my own dreams and my own aspirations for my own life, and to own my desires, and to really just be with reality, to simplify it. And not only be with reality, but see how much more reality is than I ever thought it was.
Ooh, that one right there. To see how much more reality is than I ever thought it was. And here we are back at the grounding part of your show. This is because it can be easy to get into this rabbit hole. And I put a post up about this, and the waking life that you summarize is, I used to have a feeling that, like, maybe I'm asleep. Maybe this is my subconscious trying to tell me I'm in a coma, like that I'm actually living in a dream. And then I started just taking action in this 3D reality, the actions that I have been avoiding, right? The actions that actually work, that I was going deeper into myself. I wasn't actually going deeper into myself. I was just hiding to try and find a way to do things differently, or to do them my way. It turns out these actions work, and I can do them as me, and that's what makes them doing it my way. Right? Everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel in the name of, and this is I'm gonna tread carefully here, because I do help people unveil their authenticity, right? And everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel in the name of authenticity. And if you just spin the wheel, you can spin it as you.
Can you give a really specific practical example, maybe that shows up in your work, of what you mean by that?
Yeah. So people will be like, "Oh, marketing feels inauthentic." Oh, it feels inauthentic to sell people. Like, does it? Like, does it really feel inauthentic? Like, what do you actually feel? Well, actually, there's this story about the time with that ex of mine, or the time that I didn't follow through on this commitment, or the time about this, or the time about that. And what it comes down to is either a fear of being seen or a self-worth thing. And people are attaching their self-worth to the idea that people need to sign up with them. A lot of coaches attach, I need to get people these results. And I've been there too. And I've had clients who, like, as I'm doing the story work with them, this one sucking down Marlboro 100s, drinking a McDonald's Big Coke, going, "Chase, I just want you to give me the answers." I was like, dude, I almost hit up Mark, like, "Homie, I'm stuck. Like, you tell me I'm good at this stuff, and I'm stuck on her." 6 months later, I got an invitation. And when we started working together, her husband passed a year prior. She hadn't done anything. 6 months later, I got an invitation to the husband's celebration of life. People are on their own timeline, too. And coaches can get hung up on, well, we can confuse, it feels inauthentic because, like, they didn't get the results that I see that they could get. Okay, cool. Are they unhappy, or are you just attaching your journey to theirs? Because there's a difference. So it's not necessarily that, this inauthentic thing comes up, or this need to be in flow and in balance. And I was reminded of this idea on a podcast I was listening to over the weekend, that you need to work harder before you know how to work smarter. And yes, we can be in flow. Yes, I spend a lot of time with my girls. No, I'm not locked in my office for 12 hours a day. And a lot of this, like, spirituality, getting back to ourselves work can be misconstrued as you don't need to work hard to get what you want. And just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's inauthentic.
On the note of the marketing feeling and authentic thing, because I've kind of gone through my own journeys with that too, and I've worked with people a little bit around that, where they get into some of the. I've actually seen people become less authentic when they start following marketing frameworks, and usually my experience is when you start to your point, when you start to attach your self-worth or your identity to the result or to the sale or to the image that you're trying to project, or you're trying to elicit a certain response, like you're creating to elicit a certain response. And if you don't get the certain response, then it's not validating you with the result that you want to get. And so your persona starts to become about am I getting the reaction and the response that I want? Yep. That's when you start to curate your expression, not from what do you actually think? What do you actually believe? What is genuine to you? You're trying to predict what's going to elicit a response. And then the more that you do that, even if you get really good at playing that game, and I got really good at playing that game. I helped people go viral. I went viral. I got the followers. I was making cash. I was getting into relationships. I was really good at playing the game. And it wasn't me.
And I would venture a wild guess that when we do uncover our stories, when we do get real, when we do see ourselves for who we actually are and get as close as possible seeing reality as it actually is, we can infuse principles over paradigms is something I've followed since my days in the fitness industry. We can infuse marketing principles and transcend paradigms without needing it to be super scripted. Right? It's all right, cool. I know that I can show up as myself, and I can still make sure the first 6 words of this video hit them in a way that they know that I'm talking to them.
Yeah. It's what do I actually think? What's actually genuine to me? And then how do I say it in a way that actually lands?
Yeah. Wait, you mean it's actually that simple?
There you go. Authenticity in a nutshell. Now, I do think that, the journey to allowing authenticity to arise spontaneously, because I think it is something that arises spontaneously. I've been trying to crack the nut of authenticity for a long time. Actually, one of the last episodes of the Art of Move podcast, which was my biomechanics podcast, we talked about the body so much and about mechanics that eventually it turned into a conversation about what actually moves the body's intent and consciousness. And as we started to talk about that, we talked about how consciousness affects our movement in the same way that our biomechanics affects our consciousness. And one of the last conversations that we had was about the nature of authenticity. I've been trying to crack this nut for a long time. And one of the things that I'm realizing is that authenticity arises spontaneously it's not when you've added all the things that allow you to be yourself. It's when you remove everything that isn't you.
Yeah.
You let go of the stories that are continually driving you to seek external validation, to basically, have other people give you permission to be yourself.
Let go of everything that isn't you and isn't yours. Yeah. Whose stories are you carrying? And it could be passed to you in this lifetime, or it could be generational stuff. There's a whole other layer of this Enlifted work where we go into mom and dad stories. We go work their stories for them. That's some. You want to talk about some getting into the magic? Talk about our physiology and authenticity in stories. One of my favorite. I've seen people numerous times, we work stories, they change very little about their lifestyle and they lose 10 or 12 pounds, right? One of my favorites, one of my clients, we're working a story about being in the fetal position when he's a kid, something violent going on. And as we're working it, he's popping and cracking in his upper back, his thoracic spine. He's a CrossFitter and he couldn't overhead squat to parallel before we worked that story. He could overhead squat to below parallel after we worked that story. So, I do not purport to understand at every level the mechanisms at play here. And stories are energy. Energy gets stored in our tissue. It's stored in our tissue. And if we continue to just pile that stuff on, that's where things like just random injuries or illnesses or chronic conditions come from. I'm a firm believer that the physical and the spiritual meet in the middle, and the stories are the Storywork. The Enlifted Method is my chosen flavor and the most effective thing I've seen to meet the physical with the energetic.
And it's fascinating because it's not, it doesn't use spiritual language necessarily. And it doesn't feel like the same sort of transcendental approach of like, we're going to you sink into your body and feel the energy, and you're not tuning into the prana and the flow and tap into the quantum field. And like, dude, I did Joe Dispenza meditations for 3 years.
I still do.
I still do every day.
Yeah.
Every day. And it's like doing that level of energy work and, trying to overcome that energy and reconditioning your body to a new mind. All that stuff is good. And also there's unconscious shit. And also it can become a form of spiritual bypassing because you're just trying to make that new reality and that new vision for a reality override all the other shit that you actually believe about yourself.
Yeah, like unless you've actually felt it, you're not going to meditate your way out of the fact that your mom chased you down with a knife when you were 12 years old. Like, it's just not going to happen. Good luck. Now, title that story, write it out as it happened, read it at a conversational pace, read it at about 80% speed, and then read it with a breath at every period, most of the commas, and some of the ands. And then send me a message and tell me how it went.
And one of the most powerful things that I've experienced in doing that process with you has been allowing myself to feel the full range of emotion that comes up and to be very in my body as I'm doing it. What I noticed is that in every line of every story that I told were the suppressed emotions that I never allowed myself to feel, or never felt safe to feel, or never felt held or seen or witnessed in a way that allowed me to be in the full reality of that. Yeah. And to quote you from earlier, where just Joseph Campbell said, any emotion felt fully is bliss. Any emotion felt fully without resistance allows the energy to move.
Yes.
And now it's not trapped in your tissues. Now it's not trapped in your energy system.
And now here's the interesting wrinkle where we can add it into business. I watch how much I talk about this because it makes it seem like, oh, you can just work your stories and get clients. No. And you can work your stories and take very aligned action, and clients seem to come to you a lot easier. One of my guys today messages me and he goes, yeah, just booked a workshop for 60 people, 2 hours for $1,500. Oh, by the way, on last week's call, we went into some stuff. And then he goes, oh yeah, and I had two contacts reach out today who I had pitched to a couple months ago who now want to talk about getting it happening. This has happened time and time again with individuals who I help. Now, they are also putting themselves out there. They are also letting the universe, God, source, their higher self, their guides, whatever force you want to choose to name it, know that they are on this path and they are actively seeking clients. And when you combine those two of cleaning out your conduit, so that, guess what? Now energy can flow better. And now we're directing it how to flow so we can direct it easier. Oh, whoa. Wait, you mean that actually creates a bit of a funnel effect where it speeds up as it goes through us and pulls things into our reality? Yes, more opportunities will come to us.
And just for an example of that in my own life, right? In the last 3 months, we've done a lot of this work, and there was a lot of cleaning out to do. And I was stuck in my business. I mean, my whole business fell apart. I scrapped my consulting business and I tried to start a new thing, but I was incredibly stifled. I went through a whole year where I was either barely making content or I'd make some and delete it, and I just couldn't show up and I couldn't create. And I'm a musician. I didn't pick up my guitar. I didn't write anything for an entire year. and I was stifled. I was completely and totally blocked. I had one contract that was keeping me afloat. And then, when that contract was getting ready to end, I was like, shit, what am I going to do? We've spent the last 3 months cleaning myself out, man, reworking my stories and creating a tremendous amount of freedom, a tremendous amount of prepping that vessel for that energy to flow. And I'm living in Tulum right now. And in the last, I'm going to say 2.5, 3 weeks, I've got one-on-one clients. I had people sign up for annual memberships to a new platform that I put together. And what's the most interesting to me is that I put the intention to be a musician. And I've had multiple opportunities to perform as a musician. I'm now being asked to be a part of hosting ceremonies and retreats, where not only am I going to be facilitating and offering my services, but I'm also going to be performing music at these events. And I'm being asked to write music with other local musicians. And I'm being asked to start playing shows. I'm being asked to be on podcasts. I'm being asked, it's like now my energy is just flowing outwards, and the opportunities are coming in ways that I've literally never experienced it in my life, actually. I've had glimpses of like, oh, wow, this is really working out for like a hot second. But the acceleration that happens when you're in that aligned space, it's fucking magic. And so before we started this podcast, I was like, dude, what's top of mind for you right now? And it's that life is unequivocally magic. It is. The nature of reality is fucking magic. And you got to act.
Yes. I have a meditation pillow. Guys, I sit on it every night. If you just sit on your pillow for 8 hours a day and meditate, like, hey, you'll probably feel good. You're going to be creating a lot of serotonin. It's going to just like, it's going to feel good though. Good luck having, you might have marginally better results than somebody who sits on the couch and watches Netflix. Only marginally though. You get out there, you take real action, and you do the work on your stories, and you have your energy in line. There is every reason that reality will be anything you so choose it and more.
The and more part is, don't like overlook that, people who are listening. The and more is the fun part to me. Life has felt like magic, and the effort, like it's felt effortless to a degree. And also, I am still showing up and doing focused work blocks. I'm still cultivating my capacity to sustain my attention and do deep work. I'm still abstaining from distractions. I'm still eating foods that support my physiology. I'm still getting 8 hours of sleep most of the time. And you still show up in integrity with your intention. You still be the person that is in alignment with the vision of the future that you want. Yeah. And also, like, when you remove the internally generated resistance, this is a word, or a phrase that keeps coming up for me in conversation and in my own mental frameworks. Like, the internally generated resistance is the block. It's like driving with the handbrake on.
Yep. 100%. Or driving and staring in the rearview mirror sometimes. If we're talking about language patterns, like, how many people talk in negations almost fully? I don't want to be late. I don't want to lose this job. I don't want to be broke. I don't want to this. I don't want to be single. I don't want this. I don't want that. Bro, you're not even staring in the rear view at that point. You're driving forward down the street, or trying to anyway, while looking out the back window at all the shit that you're trying to not be. And then if we're talking simple language patterns, I'll drop 2 more. Soft talk. Maybe, kind of, sort of, probably, like, try, sort of, perhaps, possibly, kind of, one day. Think about the flakiest person you know. I've literally heard this statement come out of somebody's mouth. I might probably try to make it tonight. It's... And if we just bake just a little bit of that into us, like, think about the confidence that just goes away right? So negations and soft talk are easy. And then the one that's a big pill to swallow is projections. They made me angry. Did they? Did their actions make you angry, or did your unwillingness to put space between your reaction and your response and inspect what was actually going on make you angry? So if you can take hold of those 3 core language patterns, life gets a lot better.
I was in ceremony with a very close friend of mine this weekend, and one of the things that he said that really stood out to me was that when someone triggers you, it's a tremendous gift, because it's showing you. So when you have a moment where you're tempted to say, they made me angry, right? So they did something that triggered something in you that you haven't looked at yourself. You got a story in there.
Yeah.
That is being brought up. So they didn't make you feel that. There's something in you that felt that in reaction to this particular circumstance. What a cool gift they held that mirror up for you. They're doing 100%. You a service to let you look at yourself in a more deep way.
I mean, yeah, before I ever... Backstory on Chase, going back lifetimes. I had a past lives reading done in 2022 where apparently I was a philosopher with a toga on, maybe even Plato, who knows. She said, I don't usually hear names, I'm hearing Platonic though. Had a couple other cool lifetimes, but then this one I cried spontaneously twice while she was recapping it. Because she told me I was a monk who was meditating daily. Like, ironic that we go from, you can't just meditate all day to this. But and that I could levitate. Like, the monastery I was at was only for the chosen. It couldn't be found. And I could levitate, and I could astral project as a ball of light. And all that to say that there's been some sort of internal knowing. Like, in a Christian church when I was a kid, I was like, well, how do we know this book has it right? And what do we do with that? Right? And when do we choose to listen to it? And even before I got into Storywork, there was a night in meditation where I popped out and I grabbed my phone and I started just writing in my notes app. And it was, the first line was, anger is often a misunderstanding of oneself. Now, that's really uncomfortable. And it's usually true.
I think that level of discomfort, the ability to be with this discomfort of self-ownership, while also not falling to the trap of self-shame when you go through that, right? Like, one of the traps that I had about anger was whenever I would feel anger, I would give the other person the benefit of the doubt, and I would project it back onto myself, and I would feel shame about it.
Yeah.
And I would feel shame about feeling angry at the other person, feeling like I'd like felt something wrong, or I hadn't taken enough accountability, or whatever it happens to be. But when you are able to look at, I'm having this emotional reaction, I'm having this like very strong visceral response. What does it say about me? Not in a punitive way, but in the spirit of, like, tell yourself the truth. What's your capacity to be with the truth?
Yeah. To fear, to refuse to face an issue is to fear the worst is true. It's a quote from one of my favorite books, Atlas Shrugged.
I haven't read that yet.
I read it when I was 22, 23 on deployment. And I went and got a quote from that tattooed on the side of my ribs, which now it's like, I'll lean more towards Joseph Campbell. And it's not that I don't suffer, it's that I know the unimportance of suffering. I know that pain is to be fought and thrown aside, not to be accepted as part of one's soul and as a permanent scar across one's view of existence. Now, yes, of course, fought and thrown aside, possibly better verbiage there with my current understanding of reality, and we still do not want to accept it as a permanent scar across one's view of existence.
No, I think the gift of suffering is to view it as a necessary part of our experience and a window into our soul, as opposed to the state of our totality. Right? I think the mistake is to, like, I remember I was going through some of the worst depression of my life, and my mother was watching me just like suffering, and she said, Anthony, the biggest lie that depression tells is that it lasts forever.
It's been my experience that things like that last longer when we try to run from it too.
What you resist persists.
Yeah, exactly. Say, no, I'm not supposed to feel this way. As opposed to, well, what's creating this? Let's go look at it. It's the analogy of the bison and the cow. A cow, both bison and cows can feel when a storm is coming. A cow will turn and walk away from it. They can't move faster than weather, so they get caught in it. And because they're going the same direction as the storm, it lasts longer. The bison turns to walk into it. And because they're going the opposite direction, it lasts a much shorter duration.
I like that a lot, because the trap that I can see people falling into when they hear that is, when you ask yourself the question, what is this teaching me about myself? I think the mental trap could be like, if I figure that out, then I won't feel this anymore. Right? And you're still looking at it as a problem to be solved, as opposed to going into the full depth of the actual experience and allowing yourself to be with and to feel it. And so you're still trying to escape it, right? And this has been like a very subtle thing for me, but a lot of people feeling their grief or feeling their suffering or feeling their pain, because they think that it will take over the entirety of their life. And the irony is that it does take over the entirety of your life when you spend your whole life trying to avoid it and trying to manage it and trying to escape from it.
Yep. I used to say that most people think they've dealt with something, but they just kept moving and keep dragging it behind them. Like, just because you stay moving doesn't mean you dealt with it. Like, good job. You're dragging a whole bunch. And that's another, like, okay, draw that back to the analogy about energy. How are you supposed to move at the pace at which the energy that best serves you wants to move if you're dragging all kinds of nonsense around? Good luck. You left the driveway with the parking brake on and the trailer brake, and the trailer's 10,000 pounds too heavy for the truck you're towing it with.
Spinning your wheels. And that's like, people feel like they're spinning their wheels, right? And that's... So if, we've been talking for over an hour, and I love how fast these conversations go by.
Oh, yeah.
You blink and you're like, wow, we're kind of already here. And I really like to, in this podcast, take some of the high level concepts that we've been discussing and ground them into practices and So we talked a lot about Storywork, and you talked about the 4-part process of Enlifted, and we talked about exploring our language, and we talked about a lot of different things. But if you were to distill a practice that listeners could apply themselves without maybe the guidance of a coach directing them, or something that they could practically do to look at their own stories, to start auditing their own language, where do you think a person could start?
You can use the 4-step method on your own. The thing you don't get is Chase and his 900 plus hours of experience asking questions about it. You can air a story out. There's an argument you had with your spouse, with your boss, with a coworker, with a friend. If there is somebody you lost, if there's whatever, go for the specific event though. Like, go for that conversation and what was said, and write it down as it happened. And then check in with yourself. What do you feel? Where is it in your body? 1's low, 10's high. How big is it? And then you're going to ask yourself those same check-in questions after you write it, after you read it out loud conversationally, after you read it out loud at about 80% pace, nice and slow and even all the way through, And then after you read it out loud with a giant breath at every period, every comma, and some of the ands. And take note of what shifts. It'll be different for almost everybody. At which point it hits them the hardest, at which point it clears up, if it clears up. And then if you get all the way through the breath and there's still points that are sticky, go back and read them again. Just that right there. Anybody who leans into that on their own, good work.
How can a person go about auditing their spoken language to start speaking with more power?
Soft talk challenge. Take a piece of paper and write down soft talk keywords 2 to 3 times larger than you normally write them. Maybe, perhaps, sort of, kind of, possibly, one day, kind of, try. There's more out there. That's a good start. Write down those words and stick that paper somewhere where you will see it, where your reticular activating system, which is a powerful filter for your reality, will see it. You'll start to notice it in everyday language that you're using it. Let yourself notice it. You'll naturally start editing it out. You'll start taking it out of your vernacular. I want to talk about taking out back power. Take soft talk out.
What are some words that people can include in their day-to-day speech that can align them to their own personal power?
Take out, I'll go on the addition by subtraction. Switch out this, it, that for specifics. This is hard. What's hard? I'm stuck on this. Stuck on what? It, this. So like, get specific is the words that I would add in. And I'll give a fun exercise. What if the good stuff? Write down the sentence anchor, what if? What if it all goes right? What if I land the job? What if I get the girl? What if? And read that out loud.
One of the more powerful wording shifts that I've experienced in your coaching was there were problems that felt insoluble in my life, or I felt confused about, or I was at a crossroads and I couldn't make a decision, or I wouldn't make a decision. And I would say, I can't figure out how to do this. And the framing shift would be, how do I figure out how to do this?
Yeah. Codlin's principle, I believe, is a problem written down as half solved. I switch that to a question written down as half answered. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, very powerful. And that's been even just catching myself in my own life where it's like, I don't know how to do this. And it's like, how can I figure out how to do this?
Yeah.
and then usually, and you know, when your brain asks a question, it automatically looks for an answer.
Yeah. And then life hack for anybody listening, ask good questions and then take a deep breath with a long exhale and like actually let your subconscious look for the answer.
How do you think a person could invite more magic into their lives?
Like that. Words and breath and story are all in a circle with each other. Show me somebody with their breath in their chest. I'll show you somebody with a few stories stuck in their tissues and some language they can fix. Take a breath. I have a mindfulness timer on my phone. At a random intervals, 4 times an hour, it dings a singing bowl. And I take a deep, deep breath. Breathe. And celebrate your wins.
Also something else I've learned from you.
Yeah. That's like, and I'll go at the end of every day and give yourself like full sentence wins. Don't shorthand this stuff in the journal. Like today, my client signed his first high ticket client. My client got signed a $1,500, like, you know, I got to cuddle with my daughter to start my day. Like, I cooked my girls a really good dinner after I crushed a podcast. Like, those will all be in my journal tonight. So.
And then last question, not related to anything practical. I think we gave people enough juice. Like, man, start there, guys. Like, that's gold. Like, go into that and like do that for a couple of months. See how your life changes. I'm serious. Do that for a couple of months and see how your life changes.
Yes.
Like, you should see the first call that I did with Chase compared to the last call that I did with Chase.
Different person.
Totally different person, different universe, different reality. And I'd love to know, what are you most excited for in your own work, in your own life right now?
There's a story about Instagram business coaches, and it's true for a lot of them. And I get clients of mine coming who have wasted time. And what I'm most excited about is the fact that I get to create a living that supports my girls while also I have coaches who are truly happy with their investment. That's a win-win-win.
That's it, man. That's it. And I can say best money I've ever spent. And I'm saying that from the bottom of my heart. Like, the best investment that I've ever made has been working with this man. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to learn more about Chase's work, I'm going to put every link that you could possibly need to find him on Instagram, to find his website, to learn more about him. He has other podcasts that he's done as well that are also excellent. You can look him up on YouTube. But I would just take the time to go check out his work. And more than that, if you're interested in learning more about his work, just reach out to him directly and have a conversation with him and experience what it is that he has to offer firsthand. Because as wonderful as the podcast is, as powerful as the practices are, to actually be held in the presence and the guidance and to, like you said, get that 900 hours of experience asking good questions that lead you to the places that you have to go, it's a fucking spiritual journey. So check that out. I'm going to leave all the links in the podcast description here. If you are interested in joining a community where we explore work like this and where you learn how to do the deep work and develop the presence and learn how to process your emotions, if you're not sure how to actually deal with the shit that comes up in your story work, you can check out my community, the Collective Individuation Group. We have daily calls every weekday where we drop in together. We do that deep focused work. And there are courses and resources on how to start approaching stuff like this. We can have conversations. You can reach out to me directly and I can help guide you through that as well. But go check out the links. Go connect with Chase personally. It's 100% worth it. Every person, I think, should do some form of story work. And I can't recommend anyone more than I can recommend Chase as a coach, a guide, a mentor in this type of work. So, Chase, thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Thank you, brother.
It was very special to me to be able to have you in this conversation. Any closing thoughts, any last words that you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up today?
There's a lot of preparation out there for becoming the person who needs to do the thing. But the only way that you can know what you need to be ready for to approach the thing around the corner is to step around the corner and approach the thing.
Amen, man. So guys, do the thing. Thank you for listening to the Conscious Grounding Podcast. We will catch you on the next episode. Thank you for listening.